It was a stormy night, and Sarah was driving home from a late shift at work. The rain was pouring down in sheets, making it hard to see the road ahead. She was almost home when she noticed a figure standing in the middle of the road, soaked to the bone. She slammed on the brakes, narrowly avoiding hitting the figure. As she rolled down her window, she could see that it was a young woman, shivering in the rain. Sarah felt sorry for her and offered to give her a ride home. The woman gratefully accepted, and Sarah helped her into the car. As they drove, the woman told Sarah her story. She had been out for a walk when the storm hit, and she had gotten lost. She didn't have a phone or any way to contact her family, and she was stranded in the middle of nowhere. Feeling sorry for her, Sarah offered to let her stay the night at her place until the storm passed. The woman gratefully accepted, and they drove on towards Sarah's house. As they pulled up to Sarah's driveway, the woman suddenly lunged at her, revealing the shocking twist. She was a serial killer who had been preying on unsuspecting victims during the storm. Sarah fought for her life, but it was too late. She had fallen into the woman's trap, and now she was just another victim of the killer's twisted game. In the end, the storm passed, and the sun rose once again. But for Sarah, it was too late. She had trusted the wrong person, and now she paid the ultimate price. It was a hot summer night, and Mia was home alone. Her parents had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving her to look after the house. She was excited to have some time to herself, and she decided to make the most of it by having a movie marathon in the living room. As she settled in to watch her favorite horror movies, she heard a strange noise coming from upstairs. She paused the movie and listened carefully, but the noise had stopped. She shrugged it off as her imagination and pressed play again. But just as the movie reached its climax, she heard the noise again, louder this time. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the hallway outside her bedroom. Panic set in as she realized that she was not alone in the house. She tried to call the police, but her phone was dead, and she had left her charger upstairs. With no other options, Mia grabbed a kitchen knife and slowly made her way up the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached the top of the stairs and turned the corner, ready to face whatever was waiting for her. But as she stepped into her bedroom, she realized the shocking twist. The intruder was not a stranger, but her long-lost twin sister, who had been separated from her at birth. Her sister had always been jealous of a perfect life, and she had finally snapped, intending to take over Mia's identity and life. Mia was shocked and horrified by the betrayal, but she knew she had to act fast if she wanted to survive. She lunged at her sister with the knife, fighting for her life. In the end, Mia emerged victorious, but the scars of that night would stay with her forever. She had learned the hard way that sometimes, the people we trust the most can be the ones who want to hurt us the most. It was a bright and sunny day, and Rachel was out for a walk in the park. As she strolled through the woods, she noticed a small cabin hidden among the trees. Curious, she decided to investigate. As she approached the cabin, she heard a strange noise coming from inside, a soft whispering sound, like someone talking to themselves. She pushed open the door and stepped inside, but the cabin was empty. Confused, Rachel turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind her, trapping her inside. Panic set in as she realized that she was locked in the cabin with no way out. As she searched for a way to escape, she noticed something strange about the walls. They were covered in strange symbols and markings, and she couldn't help but feel that they held some dark meaning. Just as she was about to give up hope, she noticed a small door hidden behind a bookshelf. She pulled it open, revealing a hidden room filled with strange artifacts and ancient relics. As she explored the room, she found a small book bound in leather, covered in the same symbols as the walls. Curiosity got the best of her, and she opened the book, hoping to uncover its secrets. But as she began to read, she realized a shocking twist. The book was cursed, and by opening it, she had unleashed a powerful evil into the world. The cabin was not just a forgotten hideaway in the woods, but a place of unspeakable horror, and now she was trapped inside with it. As the darkness closed in around her, Rachel knew that she would never leave the cabin alive, and she could only hope that others would heed her warning and stay far away from the cursed place in the woods. It was a dark and stormy night, and Sarah was driving home from work. She had taken a shortcut through the woods, hoping to avoid the heavy traffic on the highway. As she drove, she noticed a hitchhiker standing by the side of the road, his thumb outstretched. Feeling sorry for the man standing in the rain, she stopped her car and offered him a ride. The man climbed into the back seat and thanked her for her kindness. As they drove, Sarah noticed that the hitchhiker was silent, never speaking a word. She thought it was a bit strange, but she brushed it off, assuming that the man was simply tired or shy. But as they neared her house, Sarah began to feel uneasy. The hitchhiker's silence was becoming more and more unnerving, and she started to wonder if she had made a mistake by picking him up. Just as she pulled into her driveway, the hitchhiker spoke for the first time, his voice low and menacing. "Thanks for the ride," he said, before pulling out a knife and lunging at her. Sarah screamed and tried to fight back, but it was too late. The hitchhiker had already stabbed her, leaving her bleeding and alone in the darkness. As Sarah lay dying, she realized a shocking twist. The hitchhiker was not a stranger at all, but a long-lost cousin who had been declared dead years ago. He had been waiting for his chance to seek revenge on the family who had betrayed him, and Sarah's kindness had been his opportunity to strike. Sarah's death was a tragic reminder that sometimes, the people we think we know best can be hiding dark secrets and dangerous intentions. Jenny had just moved into her new apartment, but there was something strange about the place. Every night, she heard strange noises coming from the closet in her bedroom. It sounded like someone was whispering, and she could hear the faint sound of breathing. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, but the noises continued every night, growing louder and more persistent. She tried to ignore them, but they began to haunt her dreams, and she found herself waking up in the middle of the night, covered in sweat. One night, she couldn't take it anymore, and she decided to investigate the closet. She slowly opened the door, her heart racing with fear, but she saw nothing out of the ordinary. Just as she was about to close the door, she saw movement out of the corner of her eye. She turned her head and saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at her from the darkness of the closet. Jenny screamed and tried to run, but something grabbed her ankle, pulling her back into the closet. She fell to the ground, hitting her head on the hardwood floor. When she woke up, she was in a hospital room, surrounded by doctors and nurses. They told her that she had been found unconscious in her apartment, with no memory of what had happened. As she tried to piece together what had happened, she realized the shocking twist. The noises she had heard in her closet were not from a ghost or a monster, but from a person who had been hiding in her closet the whole time. The person had been living in her apartment, watching her every move, waiting for the right moment to strike. Jenny was lucky to have survived the encounter, but she would never forget the terror of knowing that someone had been watching her every move, hidden in the darkness of her closet. Emily had always been a curious person, and she loved exploring abandoned places. So when she heard about the old, abandoned hospital on the edge of town, she knew she had to check it out. One night, She snuck into the hospital, making her way through the dark hallways and empty rooms. She felt a rush of excitement as she explored the deserted hospital, the moon casting eerie shadows across the empty walls. As she reached the center of the hospital, she heard a strange noise coming from one of the rooms. It sounded like someone was whimpering. Emily followed the sound to a small room at the end of the hallway, where she saw a figure lying on a bed, its face hidden by a hooded sweatshirt. Emily approached the figure, asking if they needed help. But as she drew closer, she realized that something was off. The figure wasn't moving, and its hands were too still to be human. Suddenly, the figure sat up, and Emily saw that it wasn't a person at all. It was a life-sized doll, with cold, glassy eyes that seemed to follow her every move. Emily screamed and turned to run, but she was too late. The hospital had been abandoned for a reason, and she had triggered a trap set by the twisted mind of its previous owner. Emily had unknowingly activated a switch that set off a chain reaction of deadly traps, and she was trapped in the hospital with no way out. The shocking twist was that the whimpering figure was actually a doll, and the real danger was the deadly traps that the previous owner had left behind to trap unsuspecting trespassers. Emily had unknowingly walked into a death trap, and her love of adventure had led her to her doom. Mark had always been fascinated by the legend of the haunted cabin in the woods. The cabin had been abandoned for years, and there were rumors that it was haunted by the ghost of a young girl who had died there. One summer night, Mark and his friends decided to camp out in front of the cabin. They built a campfire and told scary stories, trying to scare each other into believing in the ghost. As the night wore on, they heard strange noises coming from inside the cabin. They heard footsteps, whispers, and even a child's laughter. Mark's friends were too scared to investigate, but Mark felt brave enough to check it out. He entered the cabin and made his way to the source of the noises. In the corner of the room, he saw a figure sitting on the floor, holding a teddy bear. The figure was a young girl, around 10 years old, with long blonde hair and a sad expression. Mark approached the girl, asking if she needed help. But as he drew closer, he realized that something was off. The girl's eyes were too still, and her skin was too pale. Suddenly, the girl's head snapped back, revealing a row of sharp teeth and a terrifying smile. Mark turned to run, but it was too late. The legend of the haunted cabin was true, and the ghost had lured him into her trap. He was trapped in the cabin with the ghost, with no way out. The shocking twist was that the ghost was not a ghost at all, but a demon who had taken on the form of the young girl to lure unsuspecting victims into her trap. Mark had fallen for the demon's trick, and he was now trapped in the cabin with no hope of escape. Sophie had always been an adventurous soul. She loved exploring abandoned places and uncovering hidden secrets. So when she heard about the old, abandoned amusement park on the edge of town, she knew she had to check it out. One night, she snuck into the amusement park, climbing over the fence and making her way through the empty rides and attractions. She felt a rush of excitement as she explored the deserted park, the moon casting eerie shadows across the empty pathways. As she reached the center of the park, she heard a strange noise coming from one of the rides. It sounded like someone was crying. Sophie followed the sound to the old Ferris wheel, where she saw a figure sitting in one of the seats, its face hidden by a hooded sweatshirt. Sophie approached the figure, asking if they needed help. But as she drew closer, she realized that something was off. The figure wasn't moving, and its hands were too still to be human. Suddenly, the figure looked up, and Sophie saw that it wasn't a person at all. It was a life-sized doll, with cold, glassy eyes that seemed to follow her every move. Sophie screamed and turned to run, but she was too late. The amusement park had been abandoned for a reason, and she had triggered a trap set by the twisted mind of its previous owner. Sophie had unknowingly activated a switch that set off a chain reaction of deadly traps, and she was trapped in the amusement park with no way out. The shocking twist was that the crying figure was actually a doll, and the real danger was the deadly traps that the previous owner had left behind to trap unsuspecting trespassers. Sophie had unknowingly walked into a death trap, and her love of adventure had led her to her doom. It was a dark and stormy night, and Lily was driving home from her late shift at the diner. As she drove down the winding, deserted road, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She turned up the radio to distract herself, but the static only added to her unease. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the middle of the road, causing Lily to slam on the brakes. The figure was a woman, soaked to the bone and shivering. Lily rolled down her window and asked if she needed help. The woman said that her car had broken down a few miles back and she had been walking for hours. She begged Lily for a ride home, and feeling sympathetic, Lily agreed. As they drove, the woman talked about her life and how she had just left her abusive husband. Lily listened intently, feeling a sense of sisterhood with the stranger. When they arrived at the woman's house, Lily offered to help her bring in her bags. As they walked up to the door, the woman turned to Lily and said, "Thank you so much for your kindness. You're the first person who has helped me in a long time." Just then, the lights flickered on, and Lily saw the woman's husband standing in the living room, holding a knife. The woman had lured Lily to her house as part of a twisted plan to get revenge on her abusive husband. In the end, the woman and her husband murdered Lily, leaving her body buried in the woods. The shocking twist was that the woman wasn't the victim, but rather the predator, using Lily's kindness to further her own deadly plan. Emma and her friends had always been fascinated by the old abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. The mansion had been abandoned for years, and there were rumors that it was haunted by the ghosts of the family who used to live there. One Halloween night, Emma and her friends decided to explore the mansion. They snuck into the old, creaky house and made their way up to the attic. As they walked around, they felt a chill in the air and heard strange whispers coming from the shadows. Suddenly, they heard a loud thump, followed by a blood-curdling scream. Emma's friends ran for the door, but Emma stayed behind to investigate. She followed the sound to a small room in the corner of the attic. As she approached the room, she saw a shadowy figure standing in the doorway. Emma froze, too scared to move. The figure beckoned her forward, and Emma felt a strange compulsion to obey. When she stepped into the room, she saw a figure lying on the bed, covered in blood. The figure turned its head and revealed itself to be Emma's own mother, who had been missing for months. Emma was shocked and horrified. She had no idea how her mother had ended up in the abandoned mansion, or who had hurt her. But as she turned to leave, she saw a reflection in the mirror. It was herself, covered in blood and holding a knife. The shocking twist was that Emma had been the one who had hurt her mother and hidden her in the mansion. Emma had been struggling with mental illness and had blacked out the night she had attacked her mother. The mansion had triggered her memories, and she had been lured into the room where she had committed the crime.